Hey folks, this is Matt Chat and this is my plywood canoe building adventure. It was supposed to be a cheap 2-week project, but instead it took a couple of months. I ended up building 2 canoes, built a canoe carrying dolly, a boat rack for my truck, and a hanging system for canoe storage. I made tons of mistakes and probably would have given up if it weren't for the money I had already spent. It became an amazing adventure, all for a canoe I wasn't sure I was going to use. Well, it's finally happened. I've gone out and purchased my plank of wood, and I'm now going to start building my canoe. I've been thinking about this since I was 17 years old. I bought my paddles back then and never used them, never bought a canoe. I got hold of one for a while. Cost me $60 in credit, so basically really it didn't cost me anything. It was fiberglass, it was broken, it needed to be resurfaced. So I bought some resurfacing products and resurfaced it and let it sit there for a few years. Then a few years later with my son, I think I bought it, I didn't have a son, and when my son was around 10 years old, we finished it. We fixed the crack in it, we painted the outside, we put a seat in it, and we went out and used it a few times. And then I stored it out back, and the snow fell on it and cracked it in half, and it was unrecoverable. So at this point I've been dreaming about building my own canoe. It's not the idea of buying one, it's the idea of building one. And I've been trying to decide about it because I don't know that I really want to use a canoe. I know that the other one we had was too big and too heavy. It was a 16-footer. And it weighed at least 75 pounds. Putting it on the truck was a nightmare, and moving it around by yourself was almost impossible. So this one here I'm going to be looking at is a 12-footer. It's not as long, and it's way lighter, about 30 pounds. So I think that this one will work fine for me, if I'm going to go out canoeing, that is. So that's the question, will I go out canoeing or not? I don't know. But what I did find, what I am going to build is a canoe based on 1 sheet of plywood. And that's the thing that got me going. It's the idea of building a 12-foot canoe with a 4x8 sheet of plywood. So I got this plan off the internet. This is my photocopy of it. It's not very good, but it'll do for what I need. It gives me the outlines, and I use this plan to cut out the pieces in cardboard, and I'll just show you that right now. So as you can see here, I've got 2 cutouts of it. One of them I've assembled, and the other one is laid out in pieces. And there's a reason for both. The first one was to try to figure out if this thing was going to work. So if you take a look inside here, this thing is just a piece of cardboard with some scotch tape on it, but it naturally takes on that canoe shape just by itself when you let it just leave it do its own thing. So that's very encouraging. I like the look on the side. You know, it's got a beautiful outline. I just love that outline. And I've noticed something else. I don't know if I can show this to you, but this here, you see when I do this movement here, if I do it on the side here like this, watch what happens at the ends. See how the ends go up when I widen here? I'm doing exaggerated, but you get a very good idea of what will happen when I put a stick in here, in the real size canoe. If I widen this, what it does is it'll curve up. Let's see if I can show to you that with the angle there. It'll curve up like this, and it'll give a curve to the bottom of the boat, which really helps for using it in the water. So I can adjust this boat very carefully, and it'll just be through the width of the piece of wood I'm going to put in the center here, or in the area of the center. So I'm a bit worried about the lines themselves, because although they look very good, they do look shallow, and I worry that this will end up making a boat that's too shallow. I also worried about, it says you can build it with 1 piece of plywood, but you're supposed to use marine plywood, good 2 sides. Well, where I live, they don't have good 2 sides, and they don't have marine plywood. It's just crazy. I'd have to order in a huge load of wood and I'm just not doing it. So I ordered good 1 side, and I decided, well, I'm just going to cut it and use the good 1 side on the outside, and the unfinished side I'll use on the inside of the boat. However, I started thinking about it, and I realized, well, what if the cuts, the way they're intended on the design, when you cut them, will they be all on the outside of the boat? So that's what I did here. I cut it out again. I marked it, but this time on one side I wrote the letter A. I don't know if you can see this here, but you can see here I've got the letter A. So that tells me this is one side, and the blank side is the other side. So here this tells me, when you see this layout, it tells me I can build an entire canoe out of one side, all putting the good side on the outside, but one piece will be from the inside. Nothing I can do about it. I've tried to jiggle around with it. It's just not going to happen. So this is one of the things I'm going to have to face. I'm going to either I have to buy another piece of plywood to do that corner piece by cutting it in reverse and then getting the right angle for it, or I have to accept that it's going to be on the wrong side, and that's what I'm going to do. I'll sand it myself, and maybe I can fix the holes of that piece so that it's acceptable for me or for use. At worst, I can fill it with epoxy paste, and it won't make much of a difference after that. Epoxy paste, I could even put fiberglass over it. So anyways, and it's only one piece, so I decided to accept that and use a piece of non-marine plywood, good one side. So that's the plan. Is now I'm going to have to mark out all these cuts onto the sheet of plywood and transfer all of this, and having built it in cardboard first really does give me a bit of help in knowing what's coming and how it's going to get assembled. So it helps me plan the cuts that I'm going to have to make. So the next step is going to be tedious, but rewarding, I suspect, because at this point I have to mark out the plywood, make a grid, and transfer all these measurements onto the plywood, and then make careful line marks. And once I've got that done, then I can start the cutting. Don't forget, the most interesting part about this is getting a 12-foot canoe out of an 8-foot piece of plywood. And the way this is done is there are pieces that you're getting in here which are lengthening other pieces from the sheet. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes together, and whether or not it works as straightforwardly as they say. Just a point I want to make about drawing straight lines on a board that's fairly long. It's very difficult to mark that line appropriately, and it is always better to mark it with more than 2 points. So if you're going to mark something, you make sure that you mark your point here and at the end, yes, but you also make another mark somewhere in the center, so that if you come along with your straight line, or what you think is a straight line, you can tell if you're missing with your line because your dots won't all fit. It is a way to help ensure that you have a straight line, because it's one thing when you're just doing a 12-foot or 12-inch line like this, but when you start getting into 8 feet long or more of straight lines, it's rather difficult to get that line. A lot of things can get in the way of getting a line. Even doing a string may not be enough, because a string, don't forget, has chalk. A chalk line has chalk on it, and the chalk will blow away. It's not a precise line. It's sort of a fairly rough line, and what you're looking for in this case is something very precise. Now that the lines are drawn on the 4x8 sheet of plywoods, I can then start transferring all the marks from the sheet onto the plywood, and using the millimeters that they've got marked on the page. So I'm going to do that now, so that it'll give me the pieces, the beginning of the pieces anyways, that I've got to cut. I just wanted to show you the drawing that I'm working from to make my canoe. I got this online from a website. I'll post the site on the comments below the first video if you're looking for it. It's a one sheet plywood canoe site, and they had various designs, which plywood boats actually, not just canoe. And this is what I got. And as you can see, there's one drawing here and then a second drawing here. It's also not the clearest image, and I've done a lot of work to try to clarify it. I've got a sort of a clearer version of it here, but it's still, as you can see, the lines are nowhere near sharp. So it's open to interpretation. And as you can see, there are two pieces to this. There are two sections. And I'm wondering if whether or not I should combine these or keep them apart, but I think that I'm going to end up having to keep them apart. Anyway, so there it is, the plan that I'm working from. So I decided to do some cutting on my plank right away. It became obvious that there was some measurements that weren't there on the sheet, and it was probably going to be easier if the plank was cut into two. As you remember, the drawing had these two separate pieces originally, and that's basically what I did. So I set up my radial arm saw to do the cut. And the one thing that has to be said, let me tell you, is a 4x8 sheet is a really big piece to handle, of wood to handle in your garage. As you can see behind me here, I've got some rollers that I had set up to support the wood when it came off the saw. But even so, just getting it in here, getting it in position and cutting it, it's pretty well stretches the capacity of my garage. But anyways, it's done, and now we can go on to the other side and continue the markings. The plan that I obtained to do this canoe is all marked in centimeters. And I don't use centimeters, millimeters actually. I don't use centimeters, millimeters. I use regular inches. And regular inches, listen to me, you know, as if it's regular. There's different measuring systems, and I use the English system out of habit, even though in Canada it's in decimals already, and I should be using centimeters. However, I determined that I'm going to continue using centimeters with this whole canoe project, because it's just easier to stick with what he's got. His numbers are very precise, and it's fairly hard to get that preciseness with the English system. And as well, you can see it just if you take a look at the measuring tape. Oops, let's see if we can show you that. That's terrible lighting for that. But anyways, you can hopefully see that the lines for inches are much wider than the lines for the centimeters and millimeters. There's a lot more measuring ability with the centimeter scale. Anyway, I'm going to stick with it and use it throughout. I had several pieces to mark with curves. As you can see, like this, the front of the boat and the back of the boat all have these curves. And these curves are repeated 4 times in the wood here, and I wanted to make sure that they were all the same. So what I did is I got myself a piece of paper, and I figured it out once on the piece of paper and set it up, and then I cut it, and then I used that same template for all of the corners on all of the pieces. So now I know that these cuts are going to be identical. Very important, because you want everything to be absolutely identical in here. They're all matched pieces of wood on each side of the boat, and you want to make sure that they always stay the same. I'm just about ready to cut the first piece here with the jigsaw. I've set myself up on to my stands. I'm well clamped and supported, so everything should happen without problem. So I'm just going to get at it. So I've cut these 2 pieces, and now I've set them up clamped together and aligned at the ends and at the bottoms, which are the straight lines. And now I'm going to use the belt sander and go right across on top to get them flush together so that they're exactly the same. And that's the goal all the time, is make sure that these pieces are the same. It's more important that they be the same than they be properly cut. So let's get at it. Well, now that I've got it all sanded now and marked on the plywood to the places that I want, I can start cutting the bigger piece of plywood. So now I've clamped the board I've cut and shaped to the board that's not cut so that I can get the exact same shape for the end. After that, I will be guaranteed that this will fit perfectly. Hi folks, I just wanted to cut in for a second here because I've just said the line here that this will guaranteed to fit perfectly. And quite frankly, that is not how things will work out. I'm talking from after I've done this canoe, and that line has to be remembered, in particular for those pieces, because as you follow this amazing adventure of canoe building, you'll find me reshaping those particular pieces several times. So this guarantee of mine isn't worth squat. Anyways, let's return you to the video. That's going to be it for this part of my canoe building adventures. I want to thank you for joining in, and I want to remind you not to forget to subscribe to my channel. Hopefully we'll find a lot of progress in the next episode. See you soon.